Oh boy, it's hard to imagine a movie being more divisive than Elle, which opens in the midst of a brutal home invasion and rape of Isabelle Huppert as the title character, follows her as she matter-of-factly demands that her friends, family, and co-workers not feel bad for her, and goes on to present an unraveling story of amoral complexity that somehow seems to be demanding the same from the audience. It's an icy movie that doesn't feel like it wants to be liked, about an icy a person who actively works to be disliked, even or perhaps especially once she finds herself enduring a violation that couldn't help but earn sympathy from anybody else. Now, for the purposes of this review, spoilers will follow. Sorry, there's just no other way to meaningfully talk about it. Now, thematically, it's covering much of the same ground as director Paul Verhoeven's other movies, which tend to have the same overriding theme. The world is complicated because most humans are terrible people. Usually, he's working in the format of a genre film, though, so that level of bemused nihilism comes off either as parody or commentary. RoboCop mocks the corporatism of 80s action cinema. Basic Instincts stripped Hitchcockian thrillers of their subtle niceties and literally rubbed the audience's faces in the implicit sexuality. Flesh and Blood is a medieval romance slathered in blood and muck of medieval reality. Starship Troopers tricks audiences into cheering for fresh-faced fascism and then laughs at them from the sidelines. But there's no genre being subverted in Elle. This is Verhoeven without a filter, and what's being held up for mockery is seemingly 21st century humanity itself. Rapists, enablers, corporate cutthroats, smug suburbanites, adulterers, and idiots. There doesn't seem to be a decent human being in the cast, and maybe that's the point. The other, more clear point is violently resisting any attempt to frame its characters as stand-ins for anything other than themselves. Elle, or rather Michelle, is someone who seems to spend every waking moment working out how to avoid any sort of broader human connection, whether to her family, friends, co-workers, her gender, or even other rape survivors. It's tempting to imagine her as an exaggerated for subversion avatar for the corporate post-feminist ideal, a woman so committed to absorbing the violence of patriarchy and redirecting it into power of her own. It's no coincidence that she reigns with an iron fist over a video game company staffed mainly by aggressive young programmers in mid-development on a violent sexed-up God of War clone, that she'll even try to forcibly twist her own rape into something that can be somehow made to work for her, somehow. When her employees show off a sequence where the gremlin-like hero of the game sexually assaults a female character, for example, her criticism, mere days removed from her own attack, is that the sequence isn't brutal or erotically charged enough. When she suspects one employee of potentially being the masked rapist who attacked and continued to stalk and harass her, she sexually humiliates him, but makes it a point not to fire him. Rather than go to the police, even when her stalker is breaking into her home leaving DNA everywhere, she refuses to report, stocks up on weapons, and starts playing mind games with a potential suspect. When we find out she's carrying on a no-strings affair with her best friend's husband, it's easily the most normal thing about her. By the time the full story comes into focus, inasmuch as it turns out she's the daughter of a famous mass murderer, and much of France still suspects that she, as a child, was in some way an accomplice to his crimes, it's almost beside the point. Sure, fine, what else would create this person? It's a nasty way to tell a nasty story, and though the usual flourishes of black humor and stylistic indulgence that often work, along with genre subversion to help Verhoeven's bitter medicine go down easier, are largely absent. I mean, on the surface it just looks like any other upscale French character piece. The matter-of-fact professionalism can't mask the director's penchant for needling his audience's sensibilities. Events seem to escalate in the wrong order. We're horrified by what happens to Michelle and want to sympathize with her as a survivor, then we're flabbergasted at how non-invested she is in her own violation, but want to sympathize with her refusal to survive in a way that's acceptable to others. You know, it's one of those things where you can feel her friend's vague sense of resentment at being denied the ability to feel good about themselves by comforting her. But then, at last, as the layers of her personal history and personality and broader life peel back even further, we're forced to confront the possibility that we've been projecting human expectations onto a character who may well be a literal goddamn sociopath. This, along with what comes next, without spoiling any further, since suffice it to say, Elle goes about as far and as dark as it could possibly go with this material, turns the film into a kind of intellectual spectacle that would probably be called a tour de force if Verhoeven wasn't being so uncharacteristically restrained on the visual side. This is a high wire act. One step out of place, and the big idea of exploring how a uniquely disturbed person responds to their own assault could tumble over into feeling exploitative or even offensively vindictive. Ha, gotcha, you felt bad, but she's just as sick as the rapist. And while that wasn't my takeaway from the film, Verhoeven is so similarly matter-of-fact visceral about the assault itself and Michelle's escalating attempts to confront it that it won't surprise me at all to see plenty of people come away thinking that Elle is exactly that, a psycho-thriller freak show co-opting rape survival narrative for sensationalism, and the film, like Michelle herself, is so disinclined to justify its existence that that reading is going to be pretty tough to argue against. But for me, what it comes down to is that Huppert is simply too good in the film, and the character she and Verhoeven work in tandem to create is too richly detailed and magnificently rendered for a film that rises and falls on her shoulders to be dismissed as mere sensationalism. Elle is no message movie. It doesn't seem to want to mean or say anything about its title character beyond presenting her and her actions for examination. But Huppert, who has seldom been better than she is here, which is saying represent something, finds the real humanity in a character that a lesser actress might only have been able to render as a collection of lurid contradiction. By the time the film wraps up, we may be no closer to understanding the totality of what drives Michelle or the decisions she makes, but her actions feel organic and authentic through the sheer force of will by which the actress keeps all her various facets contained in a singular performance. It's likely that the film is too dark and the character not conventionally likable enough to register come award season, but few actors have ever risen so magnificently to such difficult material in 2016. This is a tough movie, and its qualities, it feels vulgar to say charms or positive in this scenario, are largely so inscrutable it's tough to recommend, at least in any conventional sense. It's trafficking in dark material, and seeing one of our best working actresses deliver what might be an all-time performance will not be enough to make enduring that darkness worthwhile for plenty of potential viewers, and not just ordinary multiplex audiences either. But for my part, I found ELLE profoundly disturbing, but also fascinating and impossible to stop thinking about. Make of that what you will.